Okay, so I am from California, and I want to thank everyone from Ignite and all my friends and colleagues. And I think I have some former students and collaborators joining us today. So I'm originally from California. My parents were migrant farm workers. So when people would ask me, where are you from? I kind of would look at them and say, how much time do you have? Because I'm from everywhere, from the Southwest. We would move every 2 or 3 months. So I was in California, I was in Arizona, I was in New Mexico. We come through El Paso. El Paso was a very important part of my upbringing because it was the portal to the South. And then when my parents were out of work, we go to southern Mexico. So I grew up in Mexico, in the Pacific coast of Mexico from the south, but also in the north, in the north. And all these different places are part of who I am, right? And then I've been in El Paso for now, I've been at UTEP for 15 years. So there's a part of me that's also very much part of El Paso. I have a son that's now 13 who's a Tejano. And that Texan identity comes out when I least expect it. You know, there's an injustice and he'll stand up and he says, no, you're not going to mess with them. I'm from Texas. And then I'm kind of stunned, of how he's constantly navigating his identity and what his role is. But if anyone has known me, they know I used to push this kid with me in a stroller and go to protests, go to marches, go to meetings. When I'm at events, that's the kid running around at Café Mayapan. And our children are being raised with us. And when you think they're not listening, I think they're listening. They're seeing what we're doing. And sometimes he'll ask, is this a women and gender studies meeting? Is this a white Latina event? Are we marching for something? Like what? He usually wants an update on what the cause is for that weekend, and he's known for passing out waters. And so I am from California, but I've been in El Paso for 15 years. And I love crossing borders. I love being able to connect with people from different cultures. And that's part of my formation.
That's amazing. And where did you attend college and your major? What you
So
made?
yeah, thank you. I going to so many different schools was a struggle because I told my dad I have to graduate from one school. I can't graduate from 4 or 5 high schools. How am I going to send a transcript like that? So I was able to convince my parents to let me graduate from Calexico High School. So I'm from a small border town. I graduated from a small border town in Southern California. And that's where my identity of being bilingual, right? Coming from the border and also coming from a small town and going into the university, I applied. I was an AP student, advanced placement. So I was being prepared to go to the UC system. But I did a campus tour. I'm not going to say the university out of respect. But when I asked, where are the raza? Where are the Latinos? Where are the Chicanos? They said in the kitchen. And at that moment, I knew I didn't want to go to that university. That university was not ready for us. They were not ready for people like me. So I went to another conference at San Diego State University, and it was hosted by MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán. And they said, we want you here, you belong here. We've been working really hard to make this place welcoming for Chicanos, for Chicanas and Chicanos. And I heard the phrase, si se puede, right? I heard what it feels like to feel welcome. And then I went and I said, I've got to change my plan. I'm not going to the UC anymore. I'm going to go to San Diego State. And they're like, no, that's going one layer less. You're an AP student. You should go to the UC system. And I said, no, the university I thought I wanted to go to was not very welcoming. And I don't want to come in fighting from the beginning to be accepted. I need to know I can start fresh and feel like I belong somewhere. And so I changed directions, and I had to take like advanced art, to go to the CSU system. So I ended up going to San Diego State. I think it's one of the best decisions I made because my brothers and sisters followed. So all 5 of us, I have 4 siblings, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. All 5 of us are now graduates from San Diego State University. All of them now have master's degree. I have a PhD. So I studied international business at San Diego State. I studied Spanish and Portuguese. And then I went and studied in Guadalajara to improve my Spanish. And then I started the master's at San Diego State. And while I was at San Diego State undergrad, I ran for office. So I was involved with MECHA, I was involved with the Mexican American Business Association, but I was involved with student government. So my activism and my sense of self as a Chicana on the border and fighting for equity in higher ed started as an undergrad. Because we went to college, I went to college at a time where Pete Wilson was the governor, and we were being told that Mexicans were not welcome at the university. Our Chicano murals had been defaced with swastikas. I was told my father and I don't think you and your people belong at a university. I never thought I would live through something like that. Going through a public university in Southern California and being told you and your people don't belong here. So that really created a sense of public universities are made for the people. They're here to serve the local population. And what has happened with that university is that over time it's become impacted. Local residents from San Diego will apply to San Diego State and are not likely to get in because so many people want to go to that university. So what happens when state universities don't become accessible? It affects people like you and me, right? And so that became my struggle of fighting to make sure that we would recruit Chicanas and Chicanos into higher ed, into San Diego State, and fundraising to get buses and busing students in so that they would have the welcoming that I had one day, where they could see themselves represented and have students a few years ahead of them saying, si se puede, you belong here, we want you here, Chicana power. And for a lot of them, they had not, they had never seen that before. And I knew that I was where I needed to be. And running for office and being part of student government, they created a new position, Vice President of External Affairs. So I ran for office and I was told I had lost by 10 votes. But the election was so close that the university stepped in to do a recount. And come on Friday, I was told I had lost by 10 votes. By Monday, they had done a recount. I actually had won by 10 votes. So now I was the representative of the largest state university in California with 38,000 students that I was now responsible for representing. And my fight was a fight against 3 years of consecutive fee increases. My fight was fighting $1 million cut from financial aid. I actually did the math. I studied business. I said, that's 3,824 students that you will no longer give the opportunity to go to college. And I'm not going to let you do that, right? So being able to advocate for higher ed for me was my charge as an undergraduate student. Access and equity became my marching orders. And I knew that just as I had had the opportunity of going to a state university, that I had to work hard for others to have that opportunity too. Yeah. And so that was my undergrad. And then since I had worked really hard, I started my master's at San Diego State. And then because I was a student leader, I was asked to step up and help start a new university in CSU Monterey Bay. So I got a chance to go back to Monterey, California. That's the county where Salinas is. And I come from farm workers. Salinas didn't have a university. They had Hartnell Community College. So anyone that wanted to go to college university had to go away from the city. And that's really hard for our families when you don't have that cultural capital, when your parents have never gone to college and they don't know what it is to see them go away, So I did that for 2.5, almost 3 years in the mid-1990s. And as a student leader, I was hired to help develop curriculum, to teach, to hire administrators. And we started the university and we didn't have desks, we didn't have chalkboards. We had students sitting on the floor and I'm like, welcome to CSU Monterey Bay. We will get desks soon. We will get blackboards soon, but being part of something new for me taught me that here are my elders, here are leaders in higher ed, but sooner or later they're going to have to retire and then I have to pursue my graduate degree. So after 2 or 3 years, I went back to San Diego State, finished my degree, and then pursued a PhD in cultural anthropology at UC Riverside. And my degree in anthropology was motivated by having a Chicano mentor who was an anthropologist out of Stanford University. So I'm very grateful for great mentors in my life who saw something in me and said, you need to keep on going on to school. You got to go forward. You can't stay here. And I do want to say that every time I would go home for the holidays or for the winter or summer break, I would join my parents in the fields. So I was already doing my master's, but I was still a farm worker because that's what my parents did. And I couldn't afford just to be at home when they were getting up at 3 in the morning to go work at 5, 6 in the morning in the field. So he said, you know, you got to break those cycles. If you're already doing a master's and you're working in the fields, you got to do something different. And I'm going to bring you into the university. You can help me start a university here. And so having a mentor that pulls you out of the field and believes in you, starts training you, those are amazing experiences.
Wow, that's so inspiring.
Yeah.
How much happened in so little time.
Yeah.
Right. How old were you? I want to ask you, like, how old were you when you decided to run for office?
So I ran for office. I was senior class president.
Right.
So I ran for office in high school, and that was fun because I was never in one place. So once when I was like, okay, I'm going to be here for a year, I might as well run for office, right? And I remember running for office, and people said, but you're like a farm worker. You're like never really here. I'm like, no, but I come home every time. You all know me. Like, you'll see me later. You know, I'll be back at the end of the year. And I think for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to make the best of my senior year. So I ran for class president. And so I think for me that I was 17 years when I graduated from high school. And then I went into college and started getting involved in student organizations since I was 17. And every year I was involved in student organizations. And 4 years later, I was vice president of external affairs. So I was 21 years old. I know I was 21 years old because I had started my master's, and I did 1 year of the master's when I was recruited to CSU Monterey Bay. So I was 21 years old when I was teaching Spanish at a new university.
Wow.
And I had taken a study abroad in Guadalajara. So they asked me, what do you do at San Diego State? I said, I'm doing my master's, but I teach in the Spanish and Portuguese department. I teach intro to Spanish. And they're like, come do that for us here. And I'm like, okay. So I would take every opportunity to take trainings. So I remember I was 21 years old and I was teaching senior faculty on how to incorporate technology in the classroom. Right back then, that was all new, and I was eager and enthusiastic to learn how to use technology. And then one thing that I've shared every time, if I have a training, if I learn something, I turn around and I want to teach other people, right? Because I figured it out. Like I along my educational journey, we moved around so much that I figured that I had missed the rest of the academic year. And I always wondered, where should have I learned this? That's always been my question. If people had they see my bubble, where should have I learned this? So I feel there's gaps, right? There's gaps in my educational experiences. So every time I can, I take a training, and then I take a training. I'm like, I just learned this. Let me give you a training, right? So those are the things I continuously do.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you as well, like, what was the main reason? What led you to run for these positions?
Well, I think for me, I have to be honest. My father had been working for a big company, but when I went to college, his company closed, and he had been working for this company for over 25 years. And then all of a sudden, my parents were without a job. So when I entered college, I didn't qualify for financial aid. So I was taking a full load, and I took on 2 jobs. I've always worked 2 jobs. Like that's what became my norm. And I found that if I got involved on campus, or if I could find a job on campus, then I wouldn't have to commute everywhere. And not only did I have to work 2 jobs going into college, but I got hit by a drunk driver. And so that was the only little car I had. It was an old used car, but that's the car I needed to move around in San Diego where I didn't have family. So getting hit by a drunk driver, I was like, I need to find a job on campus. I need to find an apartment close to campus. I felt like everything was coming against me. Like if I needed one excuse to drop out, I think I had 10, right? Just like I didn't qualify for financial aid. I had 2 jobs. I got hit by a drunk driver. I'm like, what else? I forgot. I didn't even want to ask what else because I was afraid what else was going to come at me. But, you know, these are all experiences that if I ran for office, if I was one of the VPs, I think there's a little stipend. So I got a job on campus and got involved in campus politics very early on. And for me, the motivation is to make the university accessible to people that look like me, right? I made that my commitment. And I would speak to counselors, I would speak to parents, I would speak to other high school students to try to get them to come to the university. And that became my mission.
Thank you for that.
Sorry. And did you ever struggle with self-confidence in your political career?
You know, the year I got elected, I was the only Chicana that got elected. One of the biggest challenges at a big university with large Greek organizations is that Greeks run by blocks. So a Greek house will support a candidate, and then all the betas will vote for that candidate, all the sororities, all the fraternities. So there was no way that people of color could get elected into student government. So I realized that they block vote. And I realized that if we were going to be successful as Chicanos and people of color and women, progressive women, we would have to build a coalition of people of color and women, progressive women. And so I organized with other scholars and other students, with African Americans, with the Filipinos, A.B. Samahan. I realized that we had similar struggles because I know my history. And my father was a farm worker in Delano, and he would tell me that Filipinos and Mexicans would organize together, right? That he lived in labor camps and that Filipinos and Mexicans would share their food. So chicken adobo, white rice with adobo chicken, that's a Filipino dish, but I would say, well, that's also a Mexican dish because they were colonized by the Spanish and then by the US. So I realized that if farm workers were organizing and were building alliances, why can't the children of farm workers organize and build alliances at the university? And so we started organizing ourselves so that we could get to the block votes, right? So once we identify our ticket of people of color and progressive women, because we brought in the Women's Intercultural Center, we were able to get elected. And the year I got elected, I was the only woman of color that got elected. And it was really difficult. The Greeks couldn't believe that their system was crumbling. We had figured out their system. And I remember just going to classrooms, speaking to faculty and saying, "Will you give me 5 minutes? I'm running for office. And you need to get confidence quickly," because they're like, "You've got 5 minutes because then you're going to encroach in my class."
Yeah.
So I'm like, "I'm Gina Núñez. I'm running for office. This is what I've done. And if you vote for me, I will advocate for you at the state level. Right? I will fight against those fee increases." And that message resonated with people because so many students worked and went to school. And so they were being hit hard. And San Diego's expensive to live there. So I got elected. I was the only one that got elected. And then that year I figured things out. And then the following year we got better. And we got so good at running elections that people running for state assembly, people running for Congress, people running for Senate started hiring us to help run their elections, right? We were the young people who figured out how to build coalitions to win elections. And so I remember working on, I think she was a state assemblywoman, Denise DeChaney, working on her signs, working in her campaign headquarters. We were young, but we knew how to phone bank. We knew how to strategize. We knew how to cut across our own groups because I remember one situation. I was meeting with an African-American student leader and I got the stares of the Chicanos, like, "What are you doing with that man?" You know, they were judging me for stepping out of my own group, but they didn't know that we were organizing elections and we were organizing coalitions. And I said, "No, you're not going to put me in a category. I need to know who I am. And I need to know who I am well enough to be able to cross bridges and build those bridges," right? Because otherwise we're not going to get elected. We don't have enough Chicanos in higher ed to just vote for our own. So for me, the strategy of building coalitions, I learned that in College 101 as an undergraduate running for office, right? And then learning how to run elections, I would go into the classroom and I would like, "Okay, this is what we're going to do." So people are like, "Are we learning or are we organizing a meeting?" Because my organizing self would go into the classroom with, "This is what we're going to learn," right? And then they're like, "You're not like a Spanish teacher. You do like these other things, right?" And I'm like, yeah, I guess I do other things too. But I realized that was my activist self going into the classroom really with that energy. And then it turns out that I had like waiting lists of students trying to get into my intro classes. And I realized that I love teaching, that it was like really motivating people to want to learn more about my culture, my language, right? And that if you do it with love and enthusiasm, people will follow and they want to know more about what you have to say.
Yes, I completely agree.
And adding to what you just said, like to motivate young people to to be involved. I wanted to ask you, how do you think we can best keep the youth, especially young women, engaging in the civil process and get them ready to run for office? How do you think? What piece of advice will you give us?
Since, you know, when I interviewed at UTEP, I asked, you know, I'm an applied cultural anthropologist, so I really want to think that the research I do has a social implication. And I learned that in grad school when we were talking about theory and we were talking about these big words, and my head would spin. And I would ask, like, how is this going to help my community? Right? These big words, that these words that you people talk about, this coded language of power, that I have no idea what you're talking about. How is this going to help my people? So I realized that for me to be successful, I had to see myself as an applied scholar, that my research had to have a social implication. And so when I interviewed with UTEP, I said, you know, I'm an applied scholar. Are you going to let me do my thing? I do community engagement. I do applied work. And they're like, yeah, that's okay. We have the Center for Civic Engagement that Kathy Stout was running at the time. Joe Heyman is an anthropologist. He's like, there's several of us here who are working in community. So since I started at UTEP for 15 years, I've been offering community engagement opportunities in all of my classes. So we did the tabulation when I was going up for tenure of how many thousands of hours my students alone had clocked in. If 60 to 80% of my students did service learning at 20 hours per semester minimum, I think you can lead every day through your community engagement, through your engagement of the causes that matter to you, right? And these experiences in community, you realize what's needed, right? And you realize the skills they need to get to be able to get more of that work done. And you need to know that you have limited skills as well, because that's some humility that's also very good for us to know I can't do everything. I'm an anthropologist, but I learned in my research that if we wanted to get some changes done, I had to collaborate with the social workers and the counselors and anyone who had access to funding and resources. And I would ask them, what does your agency do? And if we work together, can we help people? And so as a social scientist, there's so much I can do. But if I'm working together with people with other skills and different agencies in other fields, we could do so much more.
I wanted to ask you as well, is when you were in college or during all your professional career, was there a woman or someone, like a woman that lead you on this path, like someone that mentor you or help you?
I wish I could tell you I had Latina faculty. I didn't. I didn't meet a Latina faculty until my master's. She was a Puerto Rican in public administration. I did have an art historian professor, and I was mesmerized by her elegance and her articulate, you know, nature and her ability to teach me about my culture through art. So I would look for people to mentor me, and sometimes they were female, sometimes they were male. But I had a Peruvianist, a man who would wear Birkenstocks and guayaberas. And I was like, he's white and he's wearing chanclas and guayaberas. I'm trying to like figure him out, right? And he spoke to my parents and said, your daughter has something. You need to let her go to college. And they're like, no, she's already graduating. She needs to work and like make money. And they're like, yeah, she'll work and make money, but she needs to go to college first. And this is Dr. Thomas Davies. So I want to thank him because he's already passed, but he was such a fierce advocate for immigrants. Until the day of his death, he advocated for LGBT individuals who were about to get deported. And he dedicated his life to immigrant rights. And I've had people who would push me into the fire and say, okay, te toca a ti, it's your turn. I had another professor who did that with me testifying for Central American refugees in LA. And I was a grad student. I didn't feel I had the credentials yet, but they said, you know more about that part of Mexico than I do. You go testify and see if you can help that person from being deported. So I'm grateful for the faculty I've had. There was a Chicana anthropologist who said, if you want to get into a PhD, you got to write a master's thesis. And I said, how am I going to write a master's thesis? And she's like, I don't know. I'll chair your committee, but you write a master's thesis and that'll help you get into a PhD. And so I had done research in Mexico, 2 summers of field work. And I wrote up my research findings, and she helped me write a master's thesis. And she had never been my professor, which is very gracious of her. Because reading a master's thesis when the student has never even been your student is very giving of her, Dr. Adelaida del Castillo. But I met her into my master's, right? And then at the PhD level, I had an Afro-Puerto Rican professor who became my co-chair of my dissertation. So I've had Latinas here and there, but into the master's or PhD. At CSU Monterey Bay, I also met Maria de la Luz Reyes, who was a pioneer in bilingual education. And she would say, come to my house, I'll make fideo. You know, you're funny, keep on writing, keep on going to school. You know, having people who see something in you when you don't see it, you know, when higher ed has never been part of your lexicon, your conversation, or how do you aspire to be something you don't even know exists? Because it had never been part of my reality. And so having mentors is really important. And sometimes you're going to look for them and they don't always look like you. They don't always speak like you. And that's okay, because they all have something valuable to teach you. And if they believe in you, sometimes that's all you need, for them to see that light in you and help you kind of get polished in your writing skills and your confidence, because there's many events that will challenge your confidence, that will challenge your presence in higher ed. So find those mentors. I would say find them, even if they don't look like you, find them. Ask them, will you help me? I want to get there. How do I get there? Will you help me? And there's usually people in your journey who will say, I like what I see in you. I'll invest in you. They might not say it in those words, but they'll say, send me your draft. Send me your document. I'll give you feedback, right? And if they're there, value them, you know, make sure to send them a thank you card. I remember so many letters of recommendation I've written, and I don't know, did they get in? What happened? Because you don't always hear from people. So I've learned gratitude along the way, that if people are willing to help you, you appreciate what they do. And then you reciprocate by mentoring others.
Wow. There was so much wisdom in these past 30 minutes, and I can't believe it's been 30 minutes. I just looked at the clock and this is crazy. Thank you for sharing so much of your wisdom and your heart in these conversations, because I think it is critical, right? Especially speaking as women and people of color, that we empower each other and we really always look to mentor and give back. And I think that was like a big topic that you were talking about. Always, you know, be grateful and always turn around and help the next person. And I found that that's very critical in organizations like this. So thank you, because you've been an inspiration and a helping hand to many of us on this call. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're going to go ahead and switch over to, we received some questions by people who had registered. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of these questions. And then if anybody has a question that they didn't submit that they would like to ask, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, or if you feel more comfortable, you can just put it in the chat. So I'm going to give a minute. Is anybody on here that wants to ask a question first? And just unmute yourself. If not, I'll go ahead with the other questions. Okay. And remember, as we're going along, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat as well. Perfect. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with our first question. How can we empower our young women to actually believe that they can make a difference?
I teach I think teaching by example. You invite young women to walk with you. I really love the concept of acompañar, to accompany. Invite people. I think we certainly need to learn from our elders. I'm very respectful of our elders, but also our elders need to hear the youth. What are the issues that are affecting you? What matters to you? And then people in the middle. I think I'm like, before, when someone says, you're getting middle age, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm already in the middle. I'm going to start becoming an elder very soon. And I'm okay with that. I've learned so much from our elders. So you invite people to accompany you, and you learn by doing. And if you want to learn how to get into leadership positions, you walk with the leaders and you learn humbly by I remember meeting this amazing feminist scholar in Mexico City, and I was very quiet. And she looked at me finally. She had this deep voice. And she's like, "You are so quiet. If you're so smart, why are you so quiet?" I said, "Because I'm listening, right? Because you have been writing these books for 20, 30 years ahead of me. And I'm in awe. And I'm here to listen first before I can speak." And you learn those lessons from Native Americans, right? They send off their kids to these prestigious schools, and these kids come with all these great ideas, but the elders say, "Well, you listen and learn from our elders, and then you add the new ideas to keep us going, to keep our culture going." And I love that. I love learning something new. And when I teach in the university, it's hard to grow older, faster, because you're always learning something new. I ask my students, what music are you into? What are your skills? Where do you like to eat? And so there's all these things I learn because I'm constantly surrounded by brilliant young minds and creative minds and very wise elders who are comfortable with me calling them when I need help. I'm very, I know my limitations. So when I need help or I'm stuck, I make some phone calls, or I say, "Do you have a few minutes? What do you think I should do here?" Because it's impossible to know everything. But if you listen, and if you listen to different perspectives, then you'll hopefully get a more well-rounded perspective to make better decisions.
Yeah, that's amazing. Our second question is, can you give us some of your thoughts and advice about workplace demands and added mental workload for working mothers during COVID?
I think it's exhausting, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think it's time for us to have crucial conversations of, if I cook, you clean, right? I'm working, and my work hasn't stopped all summer. I think it's escalated, the number of meetings, the number of interviews. I'm still doing research. I've taught 2 summer classes. I'm hit with the fact that my mother and my sister have COVID, and I've gone to California twice and come back. And it's devastating to see your loved ones hurt by this virus. While at work, I'm the one helping to write a policy, motivating faculty to wear a mask. Even though the research is there, that you've got to wear a mask to protect yourself and protect others, to practice social distancing and hygiene, there are people who still deny the research, right? And don't want to believe this. So it's very hard for me to try to convince people, because science doesn't always help convince people. So we have to be a lot more sophisticated in learning about human behavior and what motivates people to action. And sometimes they don't care about themselves. But if I say, if you wear a mask, that shows that you care about others, that you're here to protect your community. And somehow that message resonated with men, because a lot of men don't want to wear masks. They think that they're immune to the virus, and no one's immune to the virus, right? So for me, it's using the knowledge that we have available, but also trying to figure out more sophisticated ways to communicate to people, because knowledge alone or science alone is not always effective in communicating and shifting behavior. It's very important. And I certainly look to the recommendations by Dr. Fauci and the CDC, but sometimes those individuals get silenced, and sometimes we know better. And when we know better, we get silenced. And we need to know how to be more strategic and say, "I'm not going to be silenced." Or if I get silenced, you have a backup, right? I've already done that at meetings where I knew that my colleague who was going to present something critical was going to be given a few minutes, and she got cut off. But I said, "They're probably going to cut you off. So we're going to have a 1-page handout with all the data and the recommendations ready. When they cut you off, boom, we walk out with a flyer," right? And we completely shocked the people that were trying to silence us. So we always have to think ahead. We always have to think to the sidelines, or we always have to strategize and look for the allies in the midst of these meetings where we think, "Here I am." I always have to really reconsider how I'm going to position myself. I said, "Here I am, pissed off woman of color," because I can't always stay quiet. If I'm in the space, I have to say something. But honestly, there's times where you get stunned, and then you walk out saying, "I should have said something. I should have." So the more I can anticipate how someone's going to try to silence me or roadblock me, I can try to find my allies and ask for them to step in and back me up, right? Because it's hard to do everything on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next question is, could you draw some parallels between your experiences as Faculty Senate Vice President with the presidential nomination process and the Vice President choice in 2020?
Yeah, I think, I like seeing people in action. I think, in Biden selecting the vice president, I think it'd be very helpful to find out who are the women that have been making some changes, that are not afraid to speak up. And I grew up seeing Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. My father he knew them in Delano, California. He said, Cesar was very quiet. It was Dolores and all the women in the movement that were telling Cesar, this is what you're gonna do, right? If they don't give us better salaries, we're gonna boycott them. And Cesar was very calm and quiet. He was a very mellow man. So I need to figure out how to balance this, like this need to speak up and to be upfront, to be able to say, okay, how are we going to strategize this? Because being polite is not always the best strategy. And I think in finding the vice president, we need someone that is willing to speak up when no one's willing to speak up, because we can't afford to be silent. We can't afford to lose the elections this year. It really had devastating consequences for our country and the world. And I hope that we're motivated by anger, by love, by whatever moves us to get out and vote and motivate people, or drive people to the polls, or do whatever we can, and not just be Facebook activists or social media activists. That we have to do more. That helps, but physically we have to do more to create the change. And I hope that whoever is the vice president, I was so devastated to see Stacey Abrams lose. I was at the National Women's Studies Association, right? And we were waiting for the election results. And when we heard the election results that she had lost, it was like a funeral. It was like a funeral all over again. After we got the elections after 2016, it was a funeral all over again. But by then it's too late to be crying. We have to be more proactive so that we don't have to live that. I don't want to live those moments ever again.
Yeah. Okay, our next question is from Josie Avila. Have you written any books, or do you plan to? And what topics and issues do you do the most research on?
Oh, okay. So I need to really do a shout out. My femtor is in the room here. Dr. Kathy Stout has read over 16 books. And I said, if I can be 1/4 of Kathy Stout, I will have achieved my goal. I have a book that I'm working on women and community building on the border. I've done research in colonias, and I have found that the women, the mothers of the colonias, have moved mountains to be able to get water and paved roads and light and basic services to their communities. So I've been interviewing community leaders and going back into my dissertation work. I'm also working on Latina leadership. I'm working with Dr. Arely Chacon Silva on the Latina Leadership Initiative, and we're documenting this. I have an article now. So once we have that article, then we do the book proposal. And I also care about food and culture. And I think everybody eats, and food can be a great unifier. And I certainly don't take it for granted, because my parents were farm workers. Farm workers are the first responders right now, that without them, we wouldn't eat. And that's a lesson my parent taught me, right? My parents taught us that without farm workers, this world would not eat. And we can't take them for granted. And I just came back from California, and to see the devastating numbers of how many farm workers are sick because they're underinsured, they're not insured, they lack affordable housing, they're so vulnerable, and yet we depend on them to eat. So I teach a food and culture class, and I have a piece coming out on what will I feed my family during COVID-19 and Gastronomica. That's coming out this month. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is I have like 3 or 4 books in the making, and focusing on one at a time and get them out. And I write, I saw Diana Riviera, who was a graduate student who looked me up online and asked to come work with me. And she ended up writing her dissertation on single mothers in colonias. And we're part of a writing group. So we have a writing group. We meet 7:30 to 9:30 every day. We take a short break, but I write every day, and then work piles on. So I think, I still don't know Kathy Stout's method, but she shared a book with me, and I'm going to read. I read and try to emulate from the best. But I think finding a system that works and finding a support group whatever you want to do, whether it's lose weight, walk more, exercise more, finding a support group, you don't have to do it alone. And so I look forward to getting my work out there. Mm-hmm. And I've contributed to many books. I do have tenure, so I've published articles and books and book chapters. But I can't wait to see my book that I've done for my ethnographic research. I do have a co-edited book with Center for Civic Engagement, Suri Gonzalez, and we wrote a book on community engagement as a high impact practice. So that one's a 2018 book, and I'm very proud of it. But it brought 21 different contributors and different chapters together to show how we can do community engagement in El Paso. And I know Naomi also has a chapter, and I'm just so proud of everybody who contributed to that book, because we have so many examples of how we can do community engagement in El Paso. No matter what field you're in, we can all do something to create change.
Yep, that's awesome. And I think everybody is pretty interested in these resources. So maybe I'll put together some sort of resource guide and send it out to everybody who was on the webinar, so we can go ahead and have access to that.
Send me an email. I'll send PDFs of publications. I think one of the things we're taught to be humble, but when it comes to your scholarship, we have to be gracious, and not everybody has access to the internet, or not everybody has access to library resources or to books. So I PDF everything I can, and then I send it out to people, and they can always access it online or print them out.
Yeah, that's great. That would be great. Okay, moving on to our next question. What has been your key takeaway from getting involved in the Faculty Senate and gaining a more institutional political insider perspective?
That we need to be at the table, right? That every time I have a meeting, I'm thinking about access, equity, inclusion. I'm thinking about inclusion in a different way, because I've had students and colleagues who are blind, right? So inclusion talks about, people of color, working class, women, LGBT communities, but also people with disabilities and different abilities. I'm looking at inclusion in a whole different way. So not only was I vice president of UTEP, but that allowed me to represent UTEP at the state level as part of the Faculty Advisory Council. And I knew that I was representing a university on the border, and that I looked like my students, that I could code switch. I code switch in my classes all the time. I don't even realize it anymore. When I say, okay, póngase las pilas, come on, let's get started. I switch back and forth, and my students get it, right? And I switch back and forth to translate for those who don't speak Spanish, so that they don't feel excluded. And so inclusion's been really important for me, and being able to represent UTEP at the state level and say, I represent a university that has working class students. My students work and go to school. My students don't all have insurance. Some of my students have been displaced by the virus, or right now I had a student said that her father lost his job, she lost her job, that 3 members of her household have lost her job. So I don't take those things for granted. For me, understanding my students and their struggles helps me become a better professor. Right. And then when I'm at a meeting, I'm sitting there thinking, most of my colleagues are thinking from a middle class perspective, but I worked and put myself through school. So no, how's that going to affect my students? Right? How's that going to affect the people who don't have insurance? Or how's that going to affect? And it's hard, because I know that we have fees, and we have to pay for things, and we have to pay for salaries. And it's a difficult balance to think about budgets and who's going to get funded and contracts. But one of the things I've been really proud of is that I've been working with a committee to give our adjunct faculty contracts that are beyond a year, right? So now we're working on the promotion part of it, but we're going to get through these policies. And in the future, we're going to be able to offer contracts that if you've committed to UTEP, the UTEP needs to commit to you and go beyond 1-year contracts, or they don't even call them contracts because we're in Texas. So they're called offer letters. But I can't wait for the day to say, you have worked with us so many years, your offer letter's good for the next 3 years. You have a job with us for the next 3 years. Because at this moment, so many of our adjunct faculty don't have job security. So if I'm in these spaces, I have to think of those who struggle, because I've struggled. And that still maintains me, it grounds me, if I can keep that in mind whenever I enter a meeting.
Okay, we have, do you see any difference in perspectives and objectives between border students and regular students from areas not close to the border towns between Mexico and the United States?
Well, I used to teach in Monterey, California, and I think you always get the first generation students. You also get the non-traditional students that have raised their kids, or kids are already in school, they're coming to school. So I always find that, that experience of working, going to school helps me connect with the students who work. I can't tell you that I've been to a lot of privileged institutions where people don't have to work. That's not been my experience. I always figure that students love to learn, but that we have to facilitate the learning process, that we have to demystify. When we say write a paper, well, they need to know what are you looking for in your paper? What's your grading matrix? So I really like to create, here's an outline, here is the grading rubric. I want to demystify the academy, because I had to figure it out. And my parents didn't have a college degree and didn't know English. So I didn't have parents I could turn to. And so I figure that there's always a chunk of my students, a good number of them, that they don't have that support network at home. They're looking at us to help them figure this out and know that they also have kids, that they also work. At first, when students would miss class, I would worry so much. Now I'm like, okay, you can miss a couple of classes, it's not going to kill you. But if you're not in class, I can't help you. So don't make that a habit, and just being very flexible. I think now with COVID-19, I've been dropped from a master's thesis defense, a dissertation defense. So if my internet cuts off, my students' internet's going to cut off, right? They're going to get affected. And so I have to live from those experiences and learn that I can have high standards, but I also have to keep it real. I have to be human. And so ultimately students want to be seen, they want to be heard. And honestly, there's something that happened. I'll lecture for a little bit, and then I ask them to tell me about the ratings. I ask them to tell me what they got from the ratings or from the film, and invite them to teach. And this is a journey, right? That I'm not here just to do all the teaching. I'm here also to learn. And when you level the classroom, you can make education more accessible for many more students.
Yeah. Thank you for being aware of that and making a space for that. That's really incredible. And our last question is, in many universities across the United States, faculty power seems to be diminishing vis-a-vis the administration. Please comment on the UTEP situation.
Well, I've been critical from the beginning. I did not appreciate waking up one day and learning we had a president, and then learning that she was hanging out with the most wealthy men in El Paso. I realized right there and then who had hired a new president and the influence that these individuals in our community have. And I have to remind myself and my peers that we teach at a public institution on the US-Mexico borderlands. I have to remind myself every day why I chose to come to UTEP and my commitment to teach my students. And I have to kind of keep it constantly in my mind to not let the politicians dictate who will lead us and what we will teach and how we should teach. Because I remember a conversation where a very influential man's wife called the university president and wanted to have one of my colleagues fired because she didn't agree with his politics. And that should not be happening at a public institution. Back then, our campus president said, no, this is a public institution and there's faculty rights, right? We need to advocate for faculty to have the freedom to teach the classes they need to teach. And we need to be able to talk about reproductive justice and voting and environmental injustice and food scarcity and whatever we care about, and not be concerned that the companies are going to get offended or that the political bigwigs are going to be offended by our politics. We're here to educate and to challenge ourselves and to challenge our students to register to vote and to go volunteer and go do something. It's not enough to complain. That's easy. Complaining is easy. And I constantly have to remind my son that, anyone can complain, anyone can be critical, but what are you willing to do? right? How are you going to help provide a solution? Or what are you willing to do? One thing, to help feed an elderly neighbor, to give someone who doesn't have a car a ride, or take someone some medicines right now with COVID-19, or drop off a meal with someone that just had a baby. What can we do? And how do we learn from each other's movements so that we can help each other and we don't have to be alone? I see a lot of people being alone right now, that if you don't have resources, if you don't have transportation, you don't have a job, then you're on your own. And that's not the society I want to be part of. So for me in higher education, if we can constantly keep in mind that we are here to serve this region. If you look on the map, I've been to the State Board of Education in Austin before, and we were laughed at. Someone said, here's the nation of El Paso. They even have their own time zone. And I'm like, who the hell do you think you are to laugh at us? We're coming from so far and we work so hard. And I understand that the history of UTEP involved a lawsuit so that we can have graduate programs. I don't take those opportunities for granted, right? That we had to fight for our students to have access to graduate degrees, because so many of our students can't afford to take up and go to Austin or go to the North or elsewhere. So the opportunities we have did not come easy. They were not cheap. People before me have struggled really hard to make these changes and opportunities available. And I hope that our youth recognizes that we stand on the shoulders of great people, and they will do their part, and then they pass on the torch. And it's up to us to carry that and bring more light to the world. And that means getting busy, right? Doing our part. If we all do our part, you take care of the trees, you take care of the animals, you take care of the elders, you take care of the elections, you take care of the neighborhoods, you all do one thing. And I think we'll have a safer world we can live in, a more equitable world, a more just world we can live in.
Absolutely. So I just want to open it up real quick to anyone who has a question that wasn't answered. And then Vanessa, if anybody doesn't, you can go ahead and ask yours. Does anybody have one?
I just wanted to ask Dr. Núñez one simple question. How do you engulf your amor to your comadres? I just want everyone to know, the reason I want her to answer that question is because success is about failures. And you need to have your comadres, you need to have those women around you to inspire you. And that's what Gina has been to me. So I want her to talk a little bit about that.
Hi, comadre. Well, thank you. Elda is a first responder nurse, and we met as representatives of our institutions at the state level. I think we need to know each other and say, what's your cause? What are you working on? And I like that issue of vulnerability. There's several of you here that I've known for so many years that I call friends and comadres that I call. And I had a special needs child, and my father died, and my baby came preterm. And I know Kathy Stout showed up to my house one day. Iracema Coronado showed up to my house one day. People started showing up to my house saying, do you need to go see your baby in the NICU unit? I couldn't have done that. I had a C-section, and I'm so grateful that those were the darkest years of my life. But in a city where I had no family, I had friends. And sometimes I meet someone that immigrated here or that left everything behind. And then I said, what is it that you need? Where can I meet you at? And let's walk together, or call me when you need to, or send me a chat, And Elda orders these beautiful cheese platters, and we share a meal together. I love sharing dishes with people, but we share strategies, we share struggles, we share sadness. And then we dust ourselves off and pat each other in the back and say, comadre, keep on going. We have a lot of marching to do because others have marched before us, and we need to renew our spirits and ourselves. And I saw one of the questions in the chat, what would you tell your 20-year-old self is exercise, take care of your health, and take care of your teeth, right? When my teeth hurt, I don't like that. I like eating. We gotta walk more. And I admire Naomi. She works out, and I go walking sometimes, and I need to remind myself, I need to walk more often, because being alive is a privilege we have, right? And when I exercise, when I go outdoors, I feel so alive. And right now with the pandemic, people are afraid of going out. Wear your mask. find what works for you, but we've got to move. We've got to move our bodies. We've got to, and then it stimulates our brain. I carry a little notebook, or I carry a digital recorder because I have great ideas when I'm not in my desk, right? And so capture those ideas. Anyone who's been my student knows I make sure everybody has a composition book, those that come on sale in the summers. Get one for every month and fill out those composition notebooks with ideas, with book ideas, article ideas, list of things you want to accomplish, and work down those lists and do something. I think while we're on this world, we have to do something to make it better. And we don't have to do it alone. We turn to our comadres. And I have great compas too. I would hang out with guys too, because sometimes the girls I hung out with, they didn't like what I was doing. They're like, why are you going to college, girl? Just stay behind. Hell no, I have to go to college, girl. You know, these things that we need to encourage each other. I learned one thing, and I would like to leave you with this. There's always going to be people who will tell you you can't do it, or you can't get it done because you don't have X, Y, or Z. Don't listen to them. Find the people who will believe in you and go for it, right? Or go try it out. And if you fail, well, you fail, and then you get up again and you keep on trying. I love people asking me, how did you do it, right? And then looking back and me having to tell my story. Because if I would have asked a lot of people, do you think these farm worker kids can go on to college and get graduate degrees? 9 out of 10 people would have voted against us, right? And I had to find that one person who was willing to invest in me. And so I hope that you're that one person investing in others, because we all need those mentors and those teachers and the people who bring light to the world.
Wow, what a great ending note. I love it. It is already 6:30. I am shocked at this time flying by. But I did just want to close out by saying thank you so much for sharing, again, your wisdom, and not only your wisdom, but your heart. I can just see through your eyes the connection to the causes. And I think that's really important, that we have people in every level of government and politics that are close to the hurt and the pain and have been through that and have conquered that. And so very thankful to you, and also to my wonderful Vice President Marcy and our member Vanessa. Thank you both for stepping up and interviewing today. I'm really grateful to you too as well.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all the women who make the world turn. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, guys. So I did want to, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so I totally understand if you have to log off. If you would like more information about Ignite or want to become a member, I'm gonna put something in the chat so that you guys can get connected with that, and I will send a follow-up email with more resources to get connected to Dr. Núñez's work, as well as the Women and Gender Studies Department and things like that. We are all about collaboration and connection here at Ignite. So I did want to take a little bit of time and have a couple people introduce themselves. I think that was a big topic today, of just empowering other people, and you have to have, you know, your women surrounding you and your men. And so I definitely want to create that space where we're able to share with each other. So I definitely wanted to have, I know there's a couple people from the League of Women Voters on, so if somebody could step up and tell us a little bit about that. And then also, I think Brianna is here, who works for Representative Ortega. So if you guys want to chat a little bit, just so we can get connected.
Okay, my name is Carol Wallace, and I'm with the League of Women Voters. I would just like to invite everyone, whether you're a student, we invite student members, and we have quite a few student members. But our main purpose, I don't know if you know, this is the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. It was actually the League of Women Voters that started the 19th Amendment. That it was their blood, sweat, and tears that got the passage of it going. And in reality, El Paso has the League of Women Voters was founded in 101 years ago, and we celebrated that last year. We were going to have our 100th anniversary this year, but because of COVID, we can't. But we want to make sure, and Dr. Núñez, if you would encourage your students to register to vote. I know that Beatriz Vera, it works there at UTEP, and she's also on our board. It's going to be vital that everyone vote this year. So if you're not registered to vote, please, 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 Bill, let us know. I think Malaya, if you have my email address, they can contact me. They can.
Okay.
Judy Ackerman is doing fair maps and redistricting. It's very important that we redistrict fairly so that we stop gerrymandering. So the League of Women Voters is in a lot of fights that you all don't realize. We're doing the vote by mail, and we're the El Paso office is also part of that lawsuit. One of 5 counties in Texas getting for us to vote by mail, everyone to vote by mail. Someone like me, I can vote by mail or absentee ballot because of my age, but I was once young and beautiful like you all, and you have to, they're seeing whether or not you can, if any, can vote by mail. So we encourage everyone to do so. We'll let you know whether or not you'll be able to vote by mail, but hopefully that will pass the Supreme Court.
If I can add something to that, you can still request voting by mail. You have until October to request it. And you can call your representative. You can be in Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, and you can request that to apply for an absentee ballot.
But one of the provisions is that you have to have a disability. But they're not going to, as I was taught, Lisa Weiss was telling us, they're not going to they're not going to be questioning everybody's just putting down their disability. So, but right now there's a 50-50 chance that they could question you. So we'll see how that lawsuit goes through so that everyone can vote by mail. That's what we're trying to get. And it's actually an absentee ballot that you have to request, and then they send it to you, and then you have to send it in due time.
Yes. I think you need to have a disability, and like having the fear of COVID is not like, it doesn't count as one.
It's not considered one. So that's what they're fighting in the courts right now. And right now it's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. So we're waiting on that. And El Paso is one of the litigants. So the League of Women Voters of Texas is one of the litigants also. So let's hope and pray that it passes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that information. I really appreciate that. And then also we have a couple Ignite members who are currently interning and working for representatives. Marcia, do you want to chat a little bit, and also Brianna?
Yes, I am doing an internship with Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, and I was doing a fellowship with the Common Cause Texas. That it's an organization that focus on having fair elections and not having any oppression during elections. They're actually going to open their fellowship for this upcoming semester. So if someone is interested, let us know. I think we're going to post it on our social media. But if you feel you're welcome to send us a message.
Yeah, and I'll drop our Ignite Instagram. I meant to do that earlier. Thank you,
yes,
Marcy.
Just as Judy mentioned, like Common Cause is a member of Fair Maps, Texas. Like a very good initiative.
Okay, hi guys. My name is Brianna Holcomb. I currently got brought on to Representative Lena Ortega's staff in April. I'm currently serving as her community liaison. And so what that role entails is a lot of community organizing, community planning. So right now, due to COVID, there isn't a lot of that. So right now what we're trying to figure out is how to still get voter education and voter registration at the universities, EPCC campuses, as well as UTEP. Just because right now we are limited. So we're trying to figure out very creative ways that we can still be able to do that for students and for Lena's community. So we are looking for interns this upcoming fall. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop my house email in the chat. And if you would like to just go ahead and send in your resume, any information about yourself, if you're a student, what year you're in at the university, and then I will go ahead and pass those along to our Chief of Staff as well as Representative Lena Ortega. Just because right now we are in very it's a very unique time that we're in. And we're trying to figure out how to get everybody involved with voter education, just because we have a really important upcoming election. But yes, I would definitely encourage you all. I started off as Representative Lena Ortega's intern. Her community liaison at the time, Raneem Carbuji, she went and did a presentation in Dr. Furtman's class, and I signed up to be an intern, and I ended up getting an interview. I ended up interning at Lena's office, and Raneem is now working with Representative Anello. And so then I was able to go ahead and go from intern to community liaison. So I didn't know that this internship would open a lot of doors for me, but it definitely has, and it's definitely taught me a lot about the community that she is serving and just how much help the community still needs.
Great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brianna. I feel like we all started out in Representative Ortega's office. We've all been impacted by her. But yeah, I do want to encourage any women who are on this call, especially students. I do not have a traditional background in politics or policy. I think we all, especially in Ignite, we can all say that we're just really passionate about making a change in our communities, and we see things because we've been through them that are not okay. And just as Dr. Núñez was talking about, we want to create a space that's welcoming for people who look like us and people who may not have the opportunity otherwise. So if you don't know anything about politics or government, but you want to get involved, an internship is a great way to go ahead and jump into that. That's how I got started 3 years ago. I interned with Representative Ortega with Raneem at the time that she was interning. And so I never would have imagined, just like Brianna said, that it would launch into what I'm doing now and what I'm blessed to be able to work with. So is there anybody else who is from an organization that would like to speak up about opportunity or anything? I don't want to miss anybody. And thank you, Brianna, for your email. I just saw that.
Hi, I have something. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to, I am also from Leadership Women Texas, and they have a pipeline program that is a one-day virtual event this year. It's in September, and I wanted to forward you the information, but I wanted to sponsor somebody from the group, from the Ignite UTEP group. If anybody is interested, please let me know, and I can send the information to the representatives, the El Paso and state representatives. So I'll send you that email today.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
So you'll send it to me and then I'll share with it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm so happy. We had so many incredible women on this call, and I'm so excited for everything for the future. And I think even in dark times, just like Dr. Núñez is saying, we can shine our light, and I am very hopeful for everyone on this call. So thank you guys for joining, and you're more than welcome to stick on. I think I have a few meetings with prospective members. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for organizing this Ignite. Thank you.
Thank